Hi, this is Hans from Request for Music, and this is a video about XINGSHI. I'm going to be splitting it up in a couple of videos, and the first one is just to give you a look of, or an overview of the interface, so to speak. So let's just go on and dive in. I've got XINGSHI on the screen. I won't do any sound in this, just an overview, and then I'll go into depth into it in the next videos. So what do we have? We have on top, we have a pitch input and we have a gate input, and there's a switch next to the gate input because the an initial idea of XINGSHI was to have it run as a normal oscillator, but you can see in this section that there are frames available, and the frames are points in time that you have settings for your oscillator for, and so it would be able to run continuously. So that's what the CNT stands for, and otherwise reset when it receives a gate and then goes back to the first frame. So that's the basic setup, and for that, obviously there are a couple of tools here to be able to work with that. There's an overall total of frames that are available at that moment, and you can, by using the plus tool here, you can add up to 99 frames that you can go to, and it shows you the current frame that you're on, and obviously there's no extra frames in there at the moment, so it's at 1. And in here you see that there's the number of the sort of active frames, so that's what the top purple panel is for, where you see the number of the active frame, and then obviously you can go through it by using the greater and smaller sign. So if I would click on this, you see that it would add up to how many frames I would have, and this then goes through it, and you'll see that if I was to play it, but I'll do that in a different video, then I would go through these dependent of time. There's a plus sign there. There's also a minus sign, so it means that if I click that it removes that specific frame, that active frame, from the list. So if I take this a couple of times, I would go back. There's a clear button that will clear every frame. So I'm set at the initial state of the module. And there's a solo button that would remain within the active frame when you're playing. Then underneath there's a section for a carrier, a modulator, and noise, because it's actually sort of a FM or PM sort of oscillator, and the carrier, for which you actually have two, but the main carrier is the one there. You set the time of the current frame. The time can be set from 1/64th up to 8 bars. So you can see that it goes all that way. So that means that when you run frames, it's going to stick in that specific frame for up to 8 bars, or from 1/64th of a beat. And the beat, or the counting, is connected to the DAW counting, or to the DAW time, so to speak. So if you have your setting at 120, then 1/4, for instance, would be 2 beats per sec. Would be the same as your DAW or whatever. Then you have a pitch setting for that main carrier, and as you can see, there's a C2P, or carrier 2 pitch, and carrier 2 volume. So that means that the second carrier is normally off, but if you dial that on, you can mix a second carrier in. And there's a button for fixed and a button for morph, and the fixed is going to let that carrier stick on the pitch that you set, and otherwise it will follow the pitch that you have coming in from the input. And the morph is essentially a thing where it will morph from the setting from the previous frame. So if I've got it this way around, it will not do anything, and otherwise if I have it on my first switch part, it won't do that now. If I got it on my first setting, it will actually morph from the setting from the previous frame, and if I switch it to the next one, it will morph to the setting of the next frame in there. And actually, that's what works for the carrier, and that also works for the modulator. And the modulator has a pitch as well. It has a modulation level, and so that means that if you set that pitch to the same pitch as the carrier, then you're working in ratios like you would do with a DX7 or something like that, which is frequency modulation or phase modulation based actually as well. And there's a link button in between, so that means that if I switch the link button on, which makes it turn to purplish, then the pitch for both the carrier as well as the modulator and the second carrier will follow along with that pitch. And otherwise, if you switch it off, you can obviously turn those around separately. And then on the modulator, there's a fix button as well to make that stick to the same frequency all of the time, independent of the pitch. And there's an FM or PM switch for that frame for that modulator, and the morph setting, which exactly does the same as the carrier setting. So off as it is right now, or the first setting where it will follow the, or will it morph from the previous frame setting to the current frame, and the next setting which will go from the current frame to the next frame setting. And obviously that will be much more clear when I show when you watch the video that handles that kind of stuff. Underneath there is a noise section, and in noise section you can modulate with a noise source that is available in here. And the noise source has a filter where you can set the cutoff and the resonance for the filtering of that noise before it goes into the modulation, because this modulates those two carriers if available as well. And also there's a follow switch which sort of follows the keyboard. It's set at off right now, and otherwise it will follow that keyboard for that filter. And the noise setting on the side where you have those morphs as well, it's off at the moment, and otherwise you will follow the same kind of criteria as the above ones have. So it will go from the previous frame to the current frame, or when set to the right, it will go from the current to the next frame. And in that same outlined area is a pan knob, which makes you pan that specific frame to somewhere to the left or to the right. So you can have settings like that for up to 99 frames, because all of those settings are retained for those frames that you have set here. So if I would do something like this, and I would set this to a value here, and I would go to the next frame, you see that that frame keeps its own settings, and that goes for everything within this outlined box. So that means that if I have a setting of 11/16 for the first frame, the next one is still at its old setting, and the initial setting when you add a frame is 1/4. So if I just move on through this, there will be 1/4, but if I change that, you will see that those values are indeed retained. Then at the same level of the pan, but that is not going to be retained for each and every frame, is an overall envelope, attack, decay, sustain, release, where the attack, decay, and release have times of 0 or just over 0 actually, because to get rid of clicking, to 30,000 milliseconds, so to 30 seconds, so you can have very long attacks, decays, or release, which are going over the overall sound, and they are actually initialized by the gate that you send into the gate input, and so that will follow that. So initially when you put XINGSHI in your into your VM environment, and you connect it by using the left and right outputs, it will not give you any sound except you give it a gate. And in the gray area underneath you'll find the AW Galactic port by Chris Neuberger that I could include here as well. So that's a nice reverb to get you started, because otherwise obviously the sine waves that I use for carriers and modulators sound a bit dull, so this really spices it up. Then at the bottom I've got my left and right outputs, and I've got a control voltage and a gate output and a level knob. Sorry about that. At a level knob to set the volume for the output. The control voltage actually follows whatever morph settings you have for all of those carriers, and the switch next to it is a switch that decides if you just use the control voltage that morphs or that follows the morphs from the top setting, the carrier, or when you would set it to the next one, it would be the morph for the modulator or the noise, and in the latest switch all the way down, it would actually combine all of those control voltages together. Then the gate is following the output of the signal and or the time of that signal. So it creates a new gate every time you enter a new frame when you're running several frames in this. And the gate time is half of the set time in here. So that means that actually you can connect or you can hook up the gate output here with the gate input and sort of turn it into a sequencer, and I'll show that later. So that about covers what the overall interface looks like, and well, that's it for now, and please join me in the next video. Cheers, bye bye.